A couple weekends ago, my friends and I went to the city for my bud's birthday, and we were staying at a small hotel. The night we get there, we all head straight to the bar to party until the wee hours. I'm a party pooper, so after a few hours, I tell them I'm gonna go back to the hotel, and I'll see them later. At the hotel, I see a woman trying to get her baby carriage up the stairs. That's odd, because there is an elevator. I tell her I'm going to use the elevator, and that maybe it would be easier for her if she does too. She smiles and gets in with her baby carriage. Now, this is not a normal stroller, but an actual carriage. I mean, who uses those anymore? Anyway, it's just us in the elevator as the doors shut in front of us. She says her floor is the third, which is right after mine. There's an awkward silence, but she doesn't seem to mind. She's just smiling at her baby and giggling, fixing the blankets and cooing to it softly. I peer inside and see a baby doll. Just a doll. My blood ran cold. The elevator reaches the second floor, and I thank Jesus as I step out and head to my room. The woman reaches her hand out and holds the elevator door open. "Excuse me," she says. I turn around and see that she has a serious expression on her face. "I know you saw him." She said this with an eerie softness. I just smile nervously and continue walking to my room. I hear the elevator doors close as I get the room door open. Just to be sure, I check the hall to see if she followed me, and thank God she didn't. I basically noped the rest of the night away, and when I told my friends, they thought it was messed up, but otherwise didn't seem to care. When I was a kid, I was big into UFOs, conspiracies, all that. I was reading and watching stuff that I really shouldn't have been. One night, my dad was driving me home from somewhere, and we were listening to the radio. People were seeing UFOs everywhere. Apparently, the whole sky was lighting up. I had seen a few before, or at least I think I did, but this was new. Hundreds of people had seen them. Now, this was late, about 3 a.m. I can't remember why we were out that late, but we were. I was watching the skies like crazy, trying to spot something, but no dice. We got home, and as I was walking from the car to the house, the whole area lit up purple for 30 seconds. We heard this amazing boom, and then it was gone. I could see everything perfectly in the purple light. It was as bright as the sun. The next day, I went exploring to see if I could see anything new. I thought that maybe a UFO had crashed and exploded. I was wandering around these roads in the middle of nowhere, looking for crashed spaceships. And that's when I met this guy. Completely bald, and with a massive smile, like the Joker. He started talking to me about the lights in the sky, and different aliens and conspiracy theories. He had this really weird smell. I mean, he stank of it. I never smelled anything like it before or since. After a few minutes of talking to him, I jumped on my bike and sped home, totally freaked out. It was a perfectly straight road for about a mile, and every time I looked back, he was staring at me, watching me go. So, this won't make a ton of sense at first, but I'll fill in some details that I only found out much later in life. When I was maybe 5 or 6, my dad was out playing in the orchestra, so I was home alone with my mom and siblings. We were getting ready for bed when the huge oak front door slammed open and the burglar alarm went off. My mom picked up me and my siblings and scooted us under a table. She looked frantic and said to my older sister, "Stay here. If you don't hear anything, take your brothers and run to the neighbors. Don't stop no matter what you hear or see." The cops came and found nothing. It turns out, my mom had a stalker. And not just any stalker, a criminally insane stalker. At the time, she was working as a forensic psychologist. She had a patient she'd been interviewing who'd developed an obsession with her, and had just been released. In the past week, he'd somehow tracked her down, which was a lot more difficult back in '92, and had begun to leave flowers and notes on our doorstep. Nothing else ever came of it, but that was the first time in my life that I realized adults aren't really in control. I'd never seen my mom afraid before. In many ways, that experience helped me to realize that grown-ups are just as vulnerable as children to the dangers of the world. The people greeter at my Walmart got sick, so I was chosen to step in for her. I was people greeting during the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, and it was a very slow night. We only got like 5 customers after 2 a.m. This homeless dude had been standing 10 feet away from me, watching me all night. I was slightly creeped out, but decided to try and be friendly to him. He first started talking to me about all the places he'd been before. I realized that with every minute he talked, he was stepping closer and closer to me. The closer he got, the worse he smelled. And the closer he got, the more messed up his stories became. He told me about Hurricane Katrina, and about burning down a building once, just to see if he could get away with it. He told me about catching and eating ravens, and described the taste in detail. By this time, he was standing less than a foot away from me, and I noticed he had begun to whisper. Oh God, his teeth and his weird, lazy eye. I made up an excuse to leave, and told the manager to kick the guy out. I felt bad, and as he was being escorted out, he gave me a look, like he thought I had betrayed him. He glared at me as he walked out. I felt really nervous for the rest of the night. Not me, but a guy I know told me these stories. He goes to a private school in Sydney, and his school has a thing where, in year 9 or 10, they go away for a whole term to this valley about 2.5 hours south of Sydney for some camp-type thing. The school actually owns the land. It's a massive property with a river and full of forest and dense trees. They do stuff like bushwalks and kayaking, camp sort of stuff. They all stay in this one massive boarding house, where everyone can walk along to anyone else's bed without having to go through any doors. It's like one big hall. He told me that there's a rumor of a squatter that lives on the property. Apparently, when the local council put the area up for sale, he refused to sell his home. The council kicked him out and demolished his home, and now he lives somewhere on the property in a self-built shack. One day, my friend and his mates had some free time, so they went on a bushwalk. They were chilling about, walking off the trail, when they ended up stumbling upon a random shack, and one started throwing stones at the place. They had heard the rumors, and thought that they were nonsense. They were wrong. This bald guy in a big trench coat and combat boots came outside, and started screaming at them to leave. Get off my property, and, crazy guy stuff. So they leg it back to the boarding house and tell people, and they call them out and don't believe them. The rest of the day went on without incident. That night, though, at around 3 a.m., he had to pee. So he got up, did his thing, and got back to his bunk. And just as he was about to drift off, he saw something move in the corner of his eye. It was the door to the hall. The bunks were set up with the long side against the wall, so he could pretty much see the hall from his bunk. The door was slowly shifting open. He watched, thinking it was someone from his school, but he knew nobody goes out at night. There was no reason to, especially at this hour, and there was no other civilization for 20 kilometers. A figure came into the hall and closed the door quietly. He slowly made his way down the hall, my friend watching the whole time. As the figure got closer, he recognized the combat boots, the bald head, and the khaki trench coat. My friend was flipping out at this point, but he didn't dare move. The figure was incredibly silent, and he kept walking closer to the bunk until he stopped, dead in front of it. My mate almost broke, but kept quiet. The figure turned away from his bunk and looked toward the other friend, the same guy who was throwing stones at his shack. He kept standing there, staring at him for ages. That's when my friend looked around and noticed the guy in the top bunk next to the stone thrower was awake and doing the same thing as him, looking at the skinhead with a freaked out look on his face. My friend estimates it was 2 hours. The skinhead never moved, just kept staring at the stone thrower, who was asleep the whole time. Finally, the skinhead started moving, slowly as can be, and turned back towards the door. As he did, my friend and the other guy shut their eyes, pretending to sleep so they wouldn't be seen. He slowly walked past their bunks, and as quietly as he came in, he left. The next day, the 2 guys told Stone Thrower about what happened. Apparently, he didn't take it well. This happened when I was 18, and working alone at a liquor store in the worst part of town. That was a crazy place. I had knives and guns and robberies all the time. Once I even got bottled over the head. I've only got one story that was more unnerving and chilling than that. This dude rolled into the shop and picked up a 1-liter bottle of Gentleman Jack's. I stood in front of the door, as he obviously intended to leave without paying. I said, "Nah man, it's not free. Pay or leave it on the counter." He did the usual, "What? What?" He couldn't swing because he had to hold this Gentleman Jack's in his hand. As I was talking, he started shaking his head at me. I started thinking, what? I wasn't asking him questions, and it was just an unusual thing to do. I kind of walked towards him so he'd be further back in the shop, and backed him towards the counter. I ripped the bottle out of his hand and threw it onto the chair behind the counter. I picked up a bottle of wine in my hand and kept it by my side. "Leave or I'm gonna call the cops, man." He verbally abused and swore at me as he walked out. I went to the back and checked the CCTV footage to print out his photo, and what I saw terrified me. As I was standing at the door, there was someone behind me. I couldn't tell exactly what it was, but the guy had what appeared to be one of those big, forearm-length screwdrivers at his right side. As I was confronting the dude, he quietly moved right behind me and was looking at him. I realized then that that's why the dude was shaking his head. He was telling his buddy not to murder me. I've posted this a few times before. It's not paranormal, but a tale of childhood innocence colliding with messy adult relationships. One morning, I woke up early for some reason, and as I opened my eyes, I saw a disheveled woman round the top of the stairs. My bed was perpendicular to my bedroom door, which in turn faced the stairs. We made eye contact, and she silently lifted her finger to her lips to say, "Shh." This was over 20 years ago now, but I remember that she didn't look too dissimilar to the generic Asian ghost lady. She had dark hair over her face, a hunched walk, and piercing eyes. I immediately pulled the duvet up over my head, curled into a ball, and put my fingers in my ears. My heart was pounding so hard I could almost hear it. Time passed as I stayed motionless, covered in sweat. I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up a few hours later to the bright sun and the sound of my mother making breakfast while listening to the radio. I went downstairs and told her that I saw a ghost during the night. She brushed it off, and I was left to ponder the many mysteries of life that I was too young to fully understand. A few weeks later, I overheard a phone conversation my mother was having with her friend. She actually broke into the house. We woke up with her standing over us. She was bloody and had a knife on her. She could have hurt the kids. We left their bikes in front of the door so she trips over them if she tries getting in again. Apparently, what had transpired was this. The ex-wife of my mother's boyfriend had, I swear to you, just been released from a psychiatric hospital. I'm not sure what exactly happened beyond that, and I've always felt too uncomfortable to bring it up with my mom. But it triggered many years of anxiety around going to sleep. So, I've told this story on X before, but it's in the spirit of the threads, so here goes. I'm now realizing this story is 5 years old and it makes me feel ancient. But yeah, about 5 years ago, I worked at a rest stop outside of my tiny little town in southern Colorado. I worked the night shift, and at that time of night, it was really just a less than great convenience store. Anyway, this old guy started coming in pretty much every night. Very polite, very thin, always dressed in a suit and a hat, and always just wanted a large coffee and a newspaper. He came in late, around 1 a.m., and just drank his coffee, read his newspaper, and left. He was polite, as I mentioned, but not at all chatty. But I did get the story that he worked for the company that owned a big mine nearby, and he was there doing some kind of inspection. After he'd been around for about a week, one night, when he was sitting at one of the tiny little tables with his coffee and newspaper, this guy drove up to the gas pumps in a big white pickup truck. And my old man, he went up to the plate glass, put one old skinny hand on the window, and just stared at this guy. So much so that I kind of turned away to do some other stuff because it was creeping me out so much. And when I heard the pickup truck pull away and glanced over, the old guy was gone. Half-finished coffee and newspaper still on the table, and he always drove up in this big gray sedan, and, hand to God, I just can never remember if he did so that night. But regardless, I'm sure I didn't hear or see a car pull away from the spaces right in front of the store. And I never saw the old man again. When I was 16, I was spending my summer vacation in Arkansas with my uncle and cousin. My uncle runs this hunting store, so he took us out to the backwoods for a hunting trip in his RV. He drove us up to this spot in the middle of nowhere, and said that he'd been using it to track deer migration. On the third or fourth day, any food we had remaining got old, and my cousin and uncle decided to ride into town on the ATV to pick up a pizza and bring it back. They rode off, leaving me in the RV, alone, at night. I was lying on one of the folded-out beds, playing some game on my iPod, when suddenly, someone started shaking the doorknob violently, trying to get in. I thought it was my uncle or cousin, but as I got up to walk to the door, I looked through one of the windows and could see this older guy with really long hair, who started to bang on the door for a while before giving up and walking back into the woods. I hid for about 15 or 20 minutes until my uncle and cousin got back. When I told them what happened, my uncle went outside with his shotgun, firing off a couple of rounds into the air before coming back inside and telling us we were leaving. While we were getting everything packed up to go, he climbed up some trees to retrieve the SD cards from some trail cams he had placed up there. During the drive back, my cousin plugged them into the small TV in the back and skipped backward 30 or 40 minutes. The night vision image appeared and showed the long-haired guy banging on the RV door, and at least 3 other guys hiding in the trees. I used to work at a gas station for third shift. One night, a customer I had never seen before had come in and asked to use the phone. I was already behind, and decided to let him use the phone anyway, despite being told not to. He told me he was calling a cab because his ride wasn't coming for him anymore, and he didn't feel like walking the 30 miles home. I gave the stranger the phone, and he called the cops. He told the cops that he was schizophrenic and was hearing voices. He stated that the voices were telling him to kill people, and that he was a danger to himself and others. He handed me back the phone and went and sat outside. I locked the door on him, and within 5 minutes, some cop cars and an ambulance came and took him away. I don't need to deal with that being the only one on shift at 3 a.m. A few months ago, I was working a closing shift at McDonald's when this creepy-looking guy, about the age of 50 or 60, came in and ordered a coffee and muffin. While I was making his coffee, he started to ask some weird questions. He called me by name and asked, "When do you get off work?" 1? I was actually off at 11, but I didn't want to tell him that. "Do you live in town?" "Nope." "What street do you live on?" I acted like I didn't hear him. "Are you walking home?" "Nope, driving." I called my brother and asked if he could pick me up. Thank God he could. The time was now 10:30, and the dining area closed at 11. I was beginning to clean the lobby and looked out into the parking lot and saw the creepy guy. He was just standing there, watching me sweep and mop. I was actually getting scared at this point. Finally, 11 came. Normally, if someone was picking me up, I would sit on the patio, but definitely not tonight. My brother finally came, and I hopped in the car and had him take the back roads home. After driving for a little while, I looked behind us and saw the creepy guy following us in his car. By this time, we were almost home and were taking a right onto our street. As we did, the old guy took a left and saw him driving off onto Main Street. I haven't seen him since, and I dread the day I do. In hindsight, I probably should have told my brother he was following us. My grandma owns 59 acres in the country. I absolutely love this place, and I decided to have some friends over for a crawdad boil and some in-a-woods fun. We were having a great time well into the night, and we decided to bed down in a field and sleep under the stars. One friend brought a tent, and decided to sleep in that instead. The rest of us were chatting idly and drifting off, when we heard some snapping of branches. We assumed it was just some animals in the woods, and eventually I passed out. Sometime later, I was woken up by my friend shaking me. The rest of my friends were up as well, and staring at the woods. I asked what was going on, and my friend who had woken me up told me that there were people in the woods, watching us. I looked over to where my friends were shining their lights. The trees were a bit of a ways off, and the lights weren't that great, but I could just barely see it. There definitely were people on the edge of the woods. Suddenly, one of them just started cackling. My friends all tensed up, and we all got ready for something to go down. But instead, they all just walked backwards into the woods. We all stood in complete silence for a bit, before deciding to get back to the cars and waiting for daylight at the main house. I know it was probably just some crazy drifters, but that scared me on a whole nother level, because I actually felt like we were in danger. I was delivering pizzas and was making my last call at around 1 a.m., right before the end of my shift. When I got there, I saw that the house was dilapidated. I was heading to the door when from my right, I heard, "Hey." I turned to my right, and there was this bony, shirtless old man. "That's my pizza." He snatched it and started eating. "You're very handsome." Thanks?" I need the money for the pizza. Yeah, I keep it in the trailer. I'm not allowed in the house while the kids are home. This is commonly referred to as a red flag, but I was 18 and stupid. I followed him across the property to the trailer, and when he opened the door, the scent nearly gagged me. Why don't you come in? I'm good. I just need the money, thanks. You really should come in here. Nope. I turned around and ran, and this crazy old man picked up a shovel and started chasing me. I Luke Duked it across my car and got out. When I got back, my boss and I called the cops and added the place to our long blacklist.